Hi, everybody. It's Heidi M. And welcome if you're new to this channel or this page. I am going to be speaking today with actor and producer Jamie Thomas King, who is born and raised in London, England, and now resides here in Canada. We're going to be speaking about one of the latest projects that he's involved in. It's a medium length feature film called The Light Before the Sun, which is written by three-time Canadian Comedy Award winning Rob Baker. It is based on a story created by Jamie Thomas King himself with Tamara Podemski and Rob Baker. The film is about famed self-help guru named Daniel Wolfe, played by Jamie Thomas King, and who returns home to an empty house after an international book tour. And then his estranged friend, Freddie, played by Rick Roberts, arrives on the scene. There's a spiral down into the rabbit hole, drug-induced journey. They talk about the human condition, and Daniel attempts to reconcile his work as a self-help guru, the demands of his work, the demand of his followers, and his sort of quest for enlightenment or need for something more. Like, what is this all about? So a very interesting character study in a really good length film, if I say so myself. So that's just a bit of a background for you. And here I have my interview with Jamie Thomas King. So hi friends, as promised, I am sitting in the virtual room with Jamie Thomas King. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Jamie, as I was chatting with you before, I normally ask folks to introduce themselves in their own words. I know of your bio, you're an actor, well established. You also have a production company, but I want to hear from you. How would you describe your role these days?
I'm a very curious human being, I think,
Mhm.
fundamentally. Yeah, I've I've been really fortunate in my life to be able to do many different things. And when I was young, I wrestled with wanting to be a performer, but also wanting to be an artist. And those two sort of uh, forces really kind of played a role in my early life. And then as sort of in the last sort of 10, I suppose 10 or 15 years, have just become more interested in formulating my own ways of telling stories. And so, yeah, we're here to talk about The Light Before the Sun, which is a film that my wife and I just produced. And it was the first thing that we had produced. Uh, Certainly together, but really even on our own as well. And
Right.
it was yeah, it was a kind of a culmination. I've always been interested in spirituality, and I've meditated for probably 25, 30 odd years now. And so I was really interested in exploring through this character some of the aspects of life that I've lived, and answering some of the sort of the deeper questions about what I feel like, purpose and
Right.
meaning and value, and how those things are found and refound. So a long-winded way of answering your question, what do I do? I mean, but yeah.
No, I think it's a great segue into what we're going to talk about today in terms of
Mm,
the film, because I was going to ask you where it came from. I know that it's written. It was a combination of you with your partner Tamara and then
mm.
Rob Baker, and sort of what was that discussion of I have this idea. I want to explore certain parts of maybe even my own story, but through the eyes of the self-help guru.
Yeah, well, it happened at a time where, so first of all, that we were in this extraordinary position, which anybody would understand. We basically found the money. We had an investor who wanted to give us money to make a film, and it was such a, I mean, still now, I mean, it's just such an extraordinary gift to have found this great guy, Don Anderson is his name, and he gave us this gift, and so we really just didn't want to waste the opportunity, and so we started saying like, and it also came at a time when the strikes were all taking place. So there was this sort of real, uh, um, you know, a pocket of time that we had available to really give the thought process of this character, but also this difficult, period where artists and actors just writers weren't able to do their thing.
Right.
And especially coming on the heels of the pandemic, which was also just this weird period where you just
Yes.
weren't able to do it. So we wanted to explore mental health and a lot of the things that seem to be coming to the fore. And definitely at the time there was this sort of question of um, you know I think there were a few stories in the press that made us really start to think about this polarity between who they project themselves to be in the world and who they actually are in reality. And it seemed to us something that we all go through as human beings, especially now social media and these kinds of illusionary value systems that seem to make people's lives look like one thing, and then very often we're shocked when it doesn't match up, and so it seemed like the self-help guru who seems to have it all figured out. It seems like a really interesting place to start with a character that you can then sort of unravel the truth of who he is, and
Right.
hopefully see some part of your own nature. We all have who we would like people to think of us as,
Sure.
and who we actually are when we're tired and hungry. Um, and so it felt like, this gift that the universe had given us to just have free reign to make whatever we wanted to do. We wanted to do something of real meaning and value. And it seemed, this seemed like a great opportunity to elevate the vulnerability of being a human being, and how that doesn't, it doesn't really go away no matter how much you achieve, or how secure things may feel. You know,
Mhm.
any one of us are much closer to things falling apart, I think, than we would like to imagine. And I think, compassion and understanding is really essential. And that's what this film is really sort of addressing, I think.
I appreciated the male characters as well, which,
Mm,
because we want to see vulnerability in male characters more, I
right.
think, at least, I mean, I speak for a few people.
Yeah. I think you're
And
right. I think you're right.
and the duality with, or your counterpart in Freddie, who's
Hmm.
Rick Roberts is great in
Yeah.
that role. And when you were envisioning that character with your writing group, what were you thinking Freddie would be?
Well, we did know Rick. I mean, we're in this amazing situation where we got to work with, the people that we really wanted to work with. And, I've known Rick for a long, long time, and I've always been excited by him as a performer. And I knew he would bring this sort of danger to Freddie, So we wrote it very much, and, Robbie knows Rick as well. And so, as we were writing, we knew who we were writing it for. But it's interesting, this sort of question of, what he represents, and, that they are these sort of very lost, lonely, in desperate need of connection. And it's that sort of desperate need for that connection that obviously propels them into the incredibly dark night that they go down. Um,
Yeah. When you were saying we all have this potential to be or become these other side of ourselves that we're scared of,
mm,
it can happen in a situation like this, right? Where overnight, kind of the elements kind of align, and
mm.
you know,
Absolutely, and I think our society, I think, has struggles with that. I think we tend to sort of look at mental health as through we don't like to admit that it affects everybody, and
right?
actually. addiction and obsession and compulsion. And I mean, I think one thing that really struck me was we had a screener and someone said, I'm so amazed at how much compassion I feel for these
Mm-hmm.
depraved, sort of examples of patriarchy, And I think to your point, I think it is probably vulnerability is probably on the whole more of a challenge for men. And I think, definitely encouraging leaning towards it is only a good thing for men on the whole. But I think
Right.
emotional being able to sort of emotionally regulate whilst our culture and our
Mm-hmm.
society sort of urges us to keep going faster and
Right.
harder, and it's like a lot of men they don't know they don't know what to do with the amount that they're ramped up,
Right.
and I think meeting them both at this point where Daniel, the character that I play, is has put such a tight lid on that sort of need to connect, and sort of pretended to himself that he doesn't need it,
Mm-hmm.
that it's bound to you know uh, whip him up into a frenzy and make him have to face sort of darker, I suppose more challenging places to occupy.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Interesting comment from the screener person that you shared.
Mm.
Really
Hmm.
great feedback, I think, and really thoughtful feedback.
Hmm.
I know you have a great lineup of people working with you on this film, and I read the director Michael Gray Eyes' statement on this film, and I liked
Mm.
what he said about the three of you having a shorthand, sort of
Mm.
speak, in kind of on set, they kind of knew how to do what you wanted to do, when to do it. And I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you about that dynamic and what was that like during
Thank you. It's a great question. I mean, we always knew that the safer we felt as actors, the more vulnerable we would allow ourselves to be. And I think, Michael just did such an extraordinary job of holding that container for us so that we could kind of because I think there's a wonderful film called Another Round. I think it's with Mads Mikkelsen
I'm familiar with that film.
and I remember just being so struck by this sense of freedom and abandon that their characters go through, and I remember really feeling like I wanted to somehow you know tap into that, and it did seem to me more that we, as Michael said, we had a shorthand, but it was a shorthand very much of sort of this chase. I mean, it seemed to me I didn't know much about this world directly, and I learned quite a lot in the process. But that when you're seeking that kind of pleasure, um, you get the first hit and then it's gone, and the
Right.
rest of your night is chasing something that you will never experience again, which is a sad sort of reflection of, I think, that state, that kind of that speediness that I was talking about, that
Yes.
where you're empty, and no matter what you're putting in, you're only reinforcing that sense of emptiness. And so I had moments where I really, especially at the end, and because we filmed it really back to front. We had to film the last scene first, just because of
Oh,
the way that the locations worked.
I see.
So that was kind of wild, because you've seen the film. So that was a big sort of leap into the unknown. But then we had these 3 days in the house, and we managed to do things kind of chronologically.
Right.
So by the end, I was really. I was in a very vulnerable place, and it was an awful lot of craft and technique, and um, Actually, it was it was interesting. Um, it was at one point, Tamara, I was the very end sort of scene. I was really having a bit of a rough time with it. I just couldn't feel. I wasn't. I had this big close up, and I wasn't feeling it. And Michael was he's such an intuitive director, and he's very inside. He works really intentionally with the imagination and so on. And so when I was struggling, Tamara knew instantly. She was like, he has to watch playback. He just has to see, he just to watch it.
Right.
Sometimes it's not, I don't think it's a great habit to get into as an actor because then you
Sure.
start watching yourself. But there are some sort of technical things that sometimes you only can know what an audience is feeling, and you go, "Oh, I see the
Right.
shot. Okay, get it." And Michael was like adamant, like, "No, he can't watch playback. This will only put him more in his head."
I see.
And Tamara was insisted, and she came over and she suggested, and I said immediately yes. And then we were away, and it was great, and everything was kind of so it was that level of sensitivity. I think being married and both being in that space was also really unique. For both of us. We've both been obviously working for 25, 30 years now. But to work with your marriage, like
Sure.
so integral to it, and it I think only reinforced why it works, and it's about communication and feeling seen, and best idea wins, and all of those kinds of things. I mean, it was a really magical experience, the shooting.
And the other curiosity I was making it more of a medium feature length versus anything shorter. I
Yeah.
mean, in general, it's. I think it fits with the story for it to be medium
Mm.
length.
Hmm.
I'm curious on whether it was a technical reason or discussions later.
No, it really, as I said, to begin with, we didn't really have, we just wanted to tell the story, and we wanted to kind of follow these characters, and it felt like the script that Rob gave us was so rich and just really, and we felt like it needed that time. It needed, I mean, we were intending to make a short film, and then I guess the truth is we didn't really make a short film. We made it like a mid, and we've discovered actually, unbeknownst to us, that there is actually a kind of a real trend for these mid-length featurettes. Almodovar made a 52-minute film, I think, relatively recently, and there's just we consume stories in so many different ways, and I think
Right.
that mini series, that slice of 40 minutes, is a really good thing for your attention. And I think we went longer because we wanted to just pull the audience into a kind of rabbit hole that
Yes.
was obviously what the characters were going through. And every time we try to cut it back, because obviously in the film festival world, you tend to have better chances with short, but just because they're programming. So
Yes.
if you can showcase five films and five filmmakers with in 25 minutes with in their 5 minutes, then it makes sense for you. And so if that 30, so we really kind of we played around, but every time we took anything away, it just felt like it didn't have the same sort of impact. So
Right.
I think it's been a no strings attached sort of wonderful exploration, and
Right.
seems to be landing, and we're super excited to premiere at Hamilton this weekend. And
Yes.
it's an amazing thing. It feels like, when I suppose when you've written it and produced it, and it's sort of really from you, you feel this sort of parental sort of, ownership, but I guess the thing is that similar about that is this recognition that it has its own life, that
Yes.
you can set it up as best you can, but really it's the seed, and it will grow into what it grows into. And it was an amazing experience, and I'm really proud of, and I feel like everybody is proud of the work that they did, artistically, and And that doesn't it, you don't always feel that way, you know.
Sure, absolutely.
So yeah.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning the festival. I was going to segue to that as well. For
Mm,
anyone who's near Hamilton, I think it's on October 26th.
yes, thank you.
And as a programmer, I do program for a Toronto festival, and I agree. We do have a program called Morphome Mediums. It's a
Right.
genre festival. So I do know
Yeah.
what you mean about a trend
Mm,
and also trying to be fair to filmmakers, right? So we also want to be fair
hmm
in that there are films that are more than 15 minutes long, and the
hmm
story necessitates that, right? The
hmm
story, there's a requirement there for it to be a little longer because something is happening. And
Yeah.
just for anybody who's aware, who's going to see the film, it's not that long.
No, no,
It's
no.
not
It's
really
only
a
3 minutes.
long film, but it's more
Yeah.
about. I think the reason I also like talking to filmmakers and artists or anyone behind the scenes in film is that there's so many ways that we can experience a story, which is what you were
Mm,
saying, right? Not
hmm
everything has to be 3 hours. Not
hmm
everything has to be a 5 minute short.
hmm
And allowing ourselves to sit with that because I think that's to the comment of that screener where they weren't sure that we're going to like the characters or maybe they were surprised they had sympathy. And
hmm
it's because you're sitting,
Right.
right, with
Yeah,
these
I think that's a
characters.
really astute observation. I think it's hard to see the complexity, and if you don't sit with it. But what I was also going to say was I think an awful lot of these things are they're just handed down, you know. So the short film, as far as seeing historically, is just a sort of it's like an amuse-bouche. It's like you have a short point that you want to make. It's got to have some sort of a shock to it, and it's about that 15-minute kind of, but they also was like movies were always 90 minutes or, between 90 and 2 hours. And now, thankfully, all of that has shifted. And I think there's so many different ways I mean, the real thing is for me, which has been really instructive, is watching this with an audience is very different from watching it
Absolutely.
on your own. And
Absolutely.
there is something so I mean, we really went with that kind of grainy texture and that filmic kind of feel to it because we really wanted to kind of, celebrate that craft, of filmmaking and that shared experience of. I mean, I think we really wanted to explore also this sense of. Uh, it, I was listening to Nick Cave talking recently, and he was talking about grief and sadness,
Mhm.
and how very often the coexisting with joy is actually the feeling that we're searching for. It's just some sort of, an acknowledgement of the truth of the pain,
Right.
but that doesn't rob you from your capacity to experience joy. And it's very often both of those happening simultaneously.
Mhm.
And I think, in the time that we take to sit with these characters and understand them and the way that they connect to each other and themselves and, that whole thing, it sort of allows that to land for an audience, and
Sure.
doing that together in an auditorium is obviously
Mhm.
just it intensifies that.
Yes, I can see that. So I wanted to ask you because this is, as you mentioned, your first film as under the Blackbird Productions banner,
Mm,
and if you wanted to share more about the production company and sort of how you navigated that role too when it came to A Light
yeah.
Before the Sun.
It's been really exciting. I mean, we've had things, on the go as ideas for a long time, and then like everything it seems in life seems to have this thing of when things align, they can actually happen quite quickly. But it also does take a long time. It's the weird thing about time.
Right.
So yeah, we're really excited with all of the other things that we have in development. And I've written a screenplay, and Tamara's written a screenplay, and we have a TV show in development. She's sort of show running, but it's for us to star in, and we came up with the characters. And so Blackbird was the the space to really wasn't to incubate those because we've had those ideas kind of
Right.
cooking. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually the mechanism that can make it happen, you know. I mean, it was a wild thing when you become a, you know, you have a payroll and you're paying people and you're hiring people. It's very different from, you know, from being hired. So yeah, we're really excited. We feel like there's such a new regenerative sort of energy that's coming through, and it does change the work that you do as an actor. You're much more able. I mean, I have across the board, it's so much more of an appreciation of what a collaboration it all is, and how nothing works unless the team is working really. And another big takeaway was just how complex things like locations
Oh
actually
yes, for
are.
sure.
You know, and you think, oh, it's the acting, it's who, and you'll realize that actors are, there are so many talented, wonderful actors who are really available and really probably want to work, you know, but finding the right location that looks right, that has the right kind of access, that's not too far from this, and that,
Right,
you know,
right.
is available, and like all of those things, it just becomes a different sort of a different beast. And so yeah, it was crazy. I mean, you asked about how did I prepare for the role. I mean, truthfully, like we didn't have a huge amount of money, so we were doing. I was driving the camera truck.
Sure.
Um, we parked the camera truck. We managed to figure out a way that we could park it where we live in our house, and then park another car in front of it so that it couldn't be stolen. And,
Yes,
and
yes.
then, you know, so we wake up in the morning and get, I don't know, I drive the camera truck to the locations, and you know, I mean, I think in some senses that you know that did for me certainly, you know, I felt the level of responsibility really turn up, um and that probably helped me prepare for the character,
Sure. For sure.
because you know, as you've seen, the whole notion is to present someone at the beginning who's really seems to have it all figured out.
Together, right?
Yeah, so I had to a certain extent, you know, as a producer, I always felt like I had to be holding that, you know, even if it didn't always feel that way. I had to be. It's about masks, you know, is what
Yes, that was a word I read. Yes, you're right.
yeah, and I think masks are, they're not in themselves bad. They're essential. We have to have some
Sure.
masks. We have to have personas. We have to have these kinds of you know, uh, somewhat conditioned ways of looking at things. You can't just live in this sort of continual flow state, you know. But it is interesting for a character like Daniel, who, and I think, you know, mental health does tend to affect people in the arts and in that kind of, because they're seeking something,
Right.
and to enter into that truth is to admit a lot of what people, you know, probably do quite a good job of just basically ignoring for a lot of their life. So
Right.
they don't feel so sad. They don't feel those kinds of peaks and troughs, maybe.
Sure. Yes.
Um, but um, but yeah. So I feel. I mean, yeah. To answer your question, it's just a very, you know, so much of my life has been a completely unpredictable, filled with grace and you know, a combination of being aware of opportunity and just, but that you have to really get after it. So I'm writing every day, and it's
Nice.
hard, you know. Yeah, it's really,
It's hard. Yes.
yeah, I do. I mean, I flunked out of school. I mean, I always found like sitting down and studying just quite difficult for the way my brain is wired. You know, same sort of thing. I think a lot of people who perform also have slightly different, their brains are slightly different,
For sure.
have a different wiring, you know, and attention can be, you know, extraordinarily highly focused, but can also be quite disparate. And so to sit down and write is an act of self, you know, will. And I have such a, you know, such a respect for people who do it. You know, but it helps you as well. It helps you. I mean, truthfully, the film that I'm writing at the moment is an adaptation of a book, but it's very sort of personal, and I've been writing it for it. It's an adaptation of a book of there was the maternity scandals in the UK where um, and it's been, it's been a very cathartic experience. And, I've always found this about acting, but you can discover parts of your own nature and the way that you think about things in the doing of it. Um, so I'm just excited to continue that, really.
So we'll have to look forward to that. And I'm aware you have a website for Blackbird Productions. I'll make
Yep.
sure it's in the description so people know where to
Thank you.
go. I
Yeah.
noticed a social media handle somewhere,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
we
no,
have to do
and
these plugs these days.
absolutely, and it's a fantastic way. I mean, as I said, the film has a life now, and
Yes, yes,
we're on the sort of the film festival roller coaster, and there's nothing, no better way of telling people internationally we're playing in so and so,
yes,
or we're playing in
absolutely.
here. It's so yeah, people can follow and
Excellent.
all
I'll
the
be
good
sure
things.
to tag and mention.
Thank you.
So again, The Light Before the Sun is October 26th at Hamilton Film Festival. Jamie, such a pleasure to speak with you. I
You
might have to
too.
follow
Thank
up
you.
on your next project once it's
Yeah, I'd love to
ready to
talk
go.
again. Yeah,
All right. Excellent.
fantastic.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.